three people here. Yeah.
Yes, well, I certainly agree that the trade union movement should be opposing cuts, and particularly, obviously, when we have this particular instance where I think jobs are on the line, and I would certainly agree as a Green Party member that there should be some action taken if there's any compulsory redundancies. But I would just want to hope that everybody, and in terms of as Alex said about that we should be thinking about this as People's Assembly members, not just as Green Party members. Well, I think that everybody here should be not only asking or so demanding from their Green councillor, but also from Labour councillors that they refuse to vote for this budget, and I think that will make it more of a united approach. Certainly, I'm worried, and not only as a Green Party member, but also as a citizen of this town, about Caroline Lucas not being elected, because I think Caroline is a great, and as a trade unionist, because Caroline is a great supporter of the trade unions in this town, and as a person who is probably the most left-wing of all of the MPs in the whole of and so, if we would lose her. It would be a terrible thing if we lose her, I think that the more fights there are up against cuts, the more that we support Caroline, because I think Caroline is like to be dragged down by by the council going on a cuts budget. So let's.
Romain and Ben, who've both spoken before, but I'd like to take Alex first.
Yeah, thanks. Alex Phillips, I'm a councillor, a Green Party councillor in Brighton. I just wanted to say that, obviously we should vote against a cuts budget, and many Green councillors here will, and that's obvious, really. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. I think everyone in this room is probably, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people in this room are in agreement that that's the stance that we should take. But it would be a very frustrating stance if that was the only stance we were going to take. And I think this goes beyond party politics, and it's not just about having clean hands and saving face. It goes much deeper than that, and it's about protecting people. And it's great if we don't vote for a cuts budget. I certainly won't be voting for a cuts budget, but do you know what? Even if 7, 8 of us, 10 of us, whatever, don't vote for a cuts budget, even if all of us don't vote for a cuts budget, the cuts budget is still going to be implemented by officers. So what is going to be frustrating is the end result, which is going to be cuts, whether we vote for it or not. So I think that what I've taken away from the first part of this session is that now we need to think about practical things, about what we can do, whether that's really brilliant campaigning that we've seen recently, like around the fracking movement, whether we can replicate something like that, some non-violent direct action. But I think something needs to be done on a mass scale that goes beyond just a protest. That's not to belittle that protest vote, if you like, but I think that we can't just stop there, and everyone in this room, whether they're councillors or not, all of us have a responsibility to take that forward. Thank
Romain?
Romain Phoenix. I'm Green, but I'm also co-chair of the People's Assembly, and I think Alex is absolutely right, but I think that this is the start that perhaps people are looking for, a rejection of a cuts budget, and that would be the radical wake-up call maybe for other councillors around the country to start radicalising their resistance and spearheading a real fight. It was the point about unison. It's no longer just enough to be fighting for the pay and terms and conditions of the members who still have jobs anymore. But that's why I suppose Unison are one of the many trade unions that are now actively engaged with the People's Assemblies. That's nationally, and that means in every region and every local level, Unison members and other trade union members who've signed up to the People's Assembly will be taking part with all the other actions. With people here from their own campaigns, you're coming in to help. You're going to stand by for the strike actions from the for education, trade unionists, from our teaching staff, college staff, when our fire services are under threat, when the Unison jobs are at threat, that we are all promising under the People's Assembly to work with each other, to put our forces together And that's what we are going to need to do. So that's right. It's like a new understanding, I think, within the trade union movement, and I would hope that that will be long-term looking, that we've got climate change to tackle as well, so needing a just transition for some of those jobs that already exist, and putting all those things together. And of course, the people in all our communities, their interests have to be fought for, and we'll do it whatever way we can. And the only way we're going to win is by all working together. So that means sort of crossing some of those boundaries.
Okay. As I said, I'm going to favour people who haven't spoken. So there's a speaker here, and Claire, and then I've seen you, Ben, and yeah.
John and Johnny, who have no political affiliation whatsoever. I was thinking, what do ordinary people do then? And I was thinking, well, if stage one is a refusal to adopt the cuts budget, is stage two trying to widen out a kind of a sort of a way of letting local people contribute, which is almost the opposite, withdrawing payment of council tax and council rents. And then how would that go? I don't know if is that good or bad? Is that going to totally knock the budget even further, make things very difficult for everyone, or would that bring home the point even stronger? And then
Ben next.
Thanks. Well, a couple of points that I'll make really quickly. I mean, I think there's really valid points that you raised, but I would just say, well, it might be no good to blame other parties, but we've got to work out what we collectively, and that's everyone in the city, do now. It doesn't matter who we blame, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, what are we actually going to do? And that's what hopefully today's meeting is the start of that process, we're actually deciding that. And I think actually that the Green councillors will want to listen and will do the things that the community says, this is what you need to do. And that will include, of course, listening to the disabled community. And that's what Green councillors will do, that is my belief. But I was going to just really quickly say something about the privatisation that Andy mentioned, because that's a really relevant point. We decided, the Greens, and if you look at the manifesto before the last election, that we would prioritise preserving services to the most vulnerable to the furthest or greatest extent possible. Now, we did not decide, some would argue, and I might well find myself in that camp, to make our priority resisting privatisation as far as possible or keeping services completely in control of the council. Now, maybe we should have done, but we didn't. And that is a group discussion, that was in the manifesto, and that's what people voted for. Actually, a lot of what Andy's describing is based around principles that are they're very clear to those of us who have been involved in the discussions, that might not be so clear to the city out there, that they are not privatisation in terms of services going from the public to the private sector. We're talking about a greater role for the community and voluntary sector. Yes, that's still a form of privatisation. I understand exactly what Andy is saying, but please be assured that that isn't because our gut feeling is we want to transfer all this stuff to the public sector, to the private sector, rather we want to preserve the services. And really quickly, finally, I'll say that actually it works the other way too. When this city when it was a Labour council controlling it, one of the things they did was outsource the provision of placements for foster care for children and adults with severe needs. That costs the council about £2.2 million a year that we are going to save by bringing that service back in-house. They're in the proposals there. So actually we're seeing a service that is currently provided by the private sector come in-house. That will mean more council jobs. It's the exact opposite of privatisation. That is happening too.
What about the golf
Okay.
courses?
All right. John. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Unison member, a retired Unison member. Yeah, I mean, actually, about the needs budget, that's what I was going to bring up. The importance of that. That you actually set you set a needs budget, and then you say to the government, "This is what we need," and you demand it, much like they did, in the 80s. I mean, I'm not going to say it should be a replica or whatever, but something around that anyhow. I think it's still possible to kind of do something like that. But also, on the other hand, I think what's important now also is that what's going on in the trade unions. We've seen so many different sort of 1 day, 2 day strikes, half day strikes, you know, through the various unions in the last, you know, 6 months or so. And I think there is an awareness, as a contributor over there was saying, that workers are getting to the point where they've had enough. A year ago, maybe they would have, you know, carried on accepting these pay freezes and so on. But now I think they're really, you know, beginning to have had enough. This Tuesday we've got a strike by the lecturers and so on. Which union is it, Andy?
UCU and United.
So there's they've had firemen, you know, they're doing stuff. So it's all there. It's a case of putting it together somehow, you know, building some kind of an alliance. But that alliance has to be, it seems to me, around, you know, having a specific position and saying this is what we need, and telling the government this is what we need, you know, and sticking to it, and building support around that particular idea.
Okay, I've got yourself at the back there.
Yeah, I have a question to our trade union friend about the relationship between the trade unionists on the one hand locally in Brighton and the Labour Party, because you have a Labour Party that, as far as I understand it, is being quite opportunistic in exploiting the inevitable weakness of a minority Green administration. So rather than the Labour Party make common cause with their Green brothers and sisters, what they're doing is, whenever the Greens have weakness, they take advantage, and they take quite unprincipled, un-Labour stances just for narrow political advantage. So unless the trade union movement locally starts putting more pressure on the Labour Party to be a bit more principled in the way they go about their politics, and to create a bit of room for the more pragmatic Green councillors who are worried about taking principled stands, if Labour are then going to take political advantage of them doing so. And I think that's a circle that you've got to square, or is it the other way round, before we can make common cause, as people are asking for. If Labour are just going to carry on in their old school tribalistic manner, common cause is not going to be possible.
Continue, Dawn. Before that, I've got Phil and then Davy. No, all right, Davy.
Well, it seems to me what we've got to decide is, are we in a position, both with trade union support, National People's Assembly support, and our own sort of resources here, are we in a position to, in effect, launch a national campaign around of resistance, trying to base it around Brighton? I think that's really the issue. And it may be something that we can't actually decide today. I don't know, maybe people have to think about it, but it seems to me there is a real possibility of that for the first time. You know, I wish there had been a bigger campaign the last 2 years. You know, I really do wish there had been, but the fact is there hasn't been. But you sense this year that, you know, a serious minority of Green councillors are going to vote against the budget, whatever. There is serious opposition inside the trade unions. They're almost at the end of their tether. There's strikes happening in Brighton. There was 5 demonstrations and strikes in the last 5 weeks in Brighton I've been on, you know, and there's going to be another one this week. I mean, you sense it has changed. And so, you know, are we going to make that commitment? And obviously the trade unions are absolutely key to that, absolutely critical to that. And I'm not trying to put them on the spot at all, but they're critical to that. And if they and the National People's Assembly and ourselves can make that commitment, then we want to turn this now into a real focus of the struggle and help to build a broader fight back. It's not that we want the glory here, it's just, it will give people hope again. It will give people the thought that actually, yes, there are people resisting, and it's down there, and then maybe the people in Southampton, maybe instead of 2 people voting against, it might be 4 people, 5 people. Somewhere else it might be sort of 10 people start voting against. You know, that's the sort of thing. If people see other people doing it, they begin to think it's possible. So maybe both a form of civil disobedience. I'm actually quite into the idea of civil disobedience type actions being planned locally. I really am. But also maybe some sort of conference here. Maybe we could get the National People's Assembly, the trade unions, and ourselves to organise an anti-cuts conference here in Brighton early, in the new year, to help build up resistance to the cuts budget. You know, let's do those sort of practical things to really give people here and nationally hope that there is a real possibility of fighting back. And I think if we do that, it would be great. I want everyone to be involved. You know, there are lots of there's 7 Green councillors here today, no Labour councillors. I think it's a real shame. But let's get on to the Labour councillors and say, please join us, get involved in this. You know, get involved in this thing, and ask other people to get involved, other trade unions, unaligned people to be involved in this. Give them hope. let them see that there is a chance of building up resistance and an alternative.
Thank you. Okay. Dawn next, then me, then Andy, then the fella over here, and then Rob. Oh, and then Holly. In fact, I might bring Holly up that list somewhere. Okay, Dawn.
I mean, I just wanted to pick up on something about the voluntary sector, actually, and you know, it is a misnomer to think that the voluntary sector are going to be able to pick up these cuts. The result of Labour throwing money at the voluntary sector when they came into power in '97 was, in effect, A, acceptable privatisation of state-funded services, and B, it was completely taking away the power and the dynamism and everything of the voluntary sector. So what you now have is a voluntary sector that is by and large public sector. Most of the funding of most of the voluntary sector is of service provision is local authority funding. If you're also cutting that funding to charities, it's a double whammy. So the voluntary sector cannot pick up these cuts. It's ridiculous to think that they can. And so I think that it is true to say that the Greens have to vote against this budget. They should have done it year in, because I was a Green Party member when the last election. I've subsequently left and may rejoin, I don't know. I'm a wavering, all over the place sort of person. But the reason that I left was because I voted people in based on a platform of no cuts, and that hasn't happened. And I believe Alex also voted against the cuts. So when you said that it was only Ben, I think Alex also, and firstly, voted against the cuts, I believe, on your own, much of the case, and for which I personally felt very grateful, because I felt very disillusioned with the Green Party. So I think Brighton and Hove have a problem in that a Green Party that have not shown themselves to stand by their own manifesto promises, and a Labour Party and a Tory Party quite happy to work together, which seems to me like a marriage made in cloud cuckoo land. So for me, as a voter, independent of anything and the other reason that I'm here, I find myself in a very difficult position. I would love to be able to vote Green. I would love to be able to support the Green Party. I'm really, really, really pleased to hear and to see so many Green councillors here now today who are saying that they will do that. I wish I'd seen it sooner. And obviously that isn't to say that it won't happen and that can't build. And that's, I would stand behind that.
Okay. I just want to say something quickly, just as me. I mean, I think we should walk before we run in terms of, you know, leading a national campaign. As people have pointed out, we're on the back foot. We haven't got very far so far in resisting the cuts in Brighton, despite having an administration elected on an anti-cuts platform, which nobody else in the country has got. So, you know, I think we should perhaps just take it steady a bit. And I'm really interested to explore some ideas around what this gentleman here was talking about what ordinary people can do, and the ideas that other people have come up with around civil disobedience, because I think there will be, you know, it's all very well to say, let's draw up a needs budget, and I'm certainly not against that. But in terms of practically thinking about how to mobilise people, that's a very technical process, it seems to me. That's something, or it's something that we could get very bogged down in. And I think we should do it, but I think it's a long-term piece of work. And before we've got very far with that, we're going to have the council budget meeting in February, and I'd quite like to be able to use that as a focus for something that makes it clear, and I haven't got a definite proposal on this at all, but something that makes it clear that we are building an alliance, that we are acting in solidarity with the staff of the council, with the people whose services are being cut, and with the councillors who are sticking their necks out. And so, I mean, I don't know what that might be. It might be an occupation of the council chamber. It might be a picket line. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that. Andy?
Yeah, just on a couple of points. I'd like to sort of just say to Ben about the privatisation in home care. You know, I have to say to him, you know, some of the worst employers we deal with in the city are voluntary sector employers. You know, it will be seen as privatisation, and I think it's naive to think it won't be. And it undermines things like the green commitment to oppose privatisation in the NHS if you're seen to be privatising services in local government. You can't have it both ways, and I think you need to bear that in mind. In terms, I think what